Okay, everybody, welcome to Bible Study and the Prophets. We are class 7. So to answer Chris's question, 3 more classes after this. Next week, we're going to do 1 more week on 8th century prophets. And then I feel like we've done all the angry 8th century prophets we can do. And then we're going to move on to 2nd and 3rd Isaiah. And 2nd and 3rd Isaiah really grapple with the issue of inclusion. Very, very timely. And they mirror a lot of the issues of inclusion that we are dealing with. So 2nd and 3rd Isaiah will be about inclusion. And then our final one will just be kind of wrapping it up. And we're going to be looking a bit at Jeremiah. So that'll be our last class. Okay. So almost done. And then I'll tell you now, I'll put in a plug that a good friend of mine, her name is Dr. Sharon Miller, is going to be teaching a 2-part class on world religions in April, on April 21st and April 28th. And she is a professor, a retired professor, has her MDiv, taught at NYU. What she's going to do is do the first 2 classes in April as kind of an introduction for you all to meet her and to kind of talk about how she's going to lay it out. And then she's going to teach this course over the course of the entire next year. And Sharon has traveled the world as well as lived and taught from the perspective of multiple religions. So she's going to go into Islam. She's going to go into Hinduism. She spent quite a bit of time in India. And she's not going to go just into the religion itself, but also the spiritual practices as well. She's taught this class for one other UCC congregation. It's been kind of rave reviews, and so she's doing it as a favor to me. So I'm looking forward for you all to meet her in April, and then we'll kick it off in the fall next year. So that's coming up on April 21st and 28th. And I think, Bernie, you've been asking for a world religions class for years. And I've been looking for the right teacher, and I do think she's going to be the one. I think you're really, really going to enjoy meeting her and learning from her. So
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
I think you're going to enjoy this class, all of you. So keep that one in mind. That one's coming up in April. Okay, let's go into angry prophets, and let's just start with a prayer because there's a lot going on. Let us pray. Holy One, let justice roll down like waters, not as a managed stream for a few, but as a mighty cleansing river for the many. Give us the courage to seek justice and defend the oppressed, to take up the cause of the fatherless and plead the case of the widow at the city gates. Remind us that you desire mercy, not sacrifice, and the knowledge of your heart more than our burnt offerings of policy and posturing. Give us the strength to do justice, not just to speak of it, and to love mercy with the same ferocity with which we seek our own comfort. Amen. Okay, today is all about the 1%. Well, the 1%, and then we're also going to get into the stock market. So let's start with the 1%. So in 8th century Judea, we've talked about the fact that this was a time of prosperity in Judea and in Israel. No foreign countries coming down, and they used that time to basically extract the economic surplus from the rural communities and develop this luxurious lifestyle for the elite. So they developed these large estates in the rural areas, and they moved from a subsistence farming to developing trade products of oil and wine. And then they sold them and they made money off of it, right? And this supported a lifestyle of leisure and luxury. And it was a non-productive use of their time, right? So the elite were able to have a disdain of physical work, and they were able to afford an idle lifestyle. And this lifestyle, what impacted everything that they did, where they lived, what they ate, what they wore, and what they did in their leisure. And when we start to look at what the prophets are going to be angry about, they're going to be angry about all of this conspicuous activity, where they live, what they eat, what they wear, and what they do with their leisure. And a common kind of theme of this is how much waste is in what they do, that there's so much privilege in their ability to just waste. It's a very decadent lifestyle. We're also going to encounter the prophets being very angry about, in particular, the women and the manner in which the women display their wealth through adornment, through clothing and perfume and jewelry and footwear, including, and that all of this conspicuous wealth is displayed on their bodies. And again, all of this comes from taking advantage of the peasants. So all of this is born on the backs of the peasants. Let's start with where they live. I will tear down winter houses as well as the summer houses, and the houses of ivory shall perish, and the great houses shall come to an end, says the Lord. So an angry God, right? Okay. This is an angry God because the prophet is condemning this self-indulgent, really privileged lifestyle of that elite upper class, right? So they are living in these conspicuous, massive dwellings. They're living in these large land holdings where that used to be, small individual farms. And the prophet's saying, you don't even just have one house, you have two houses. You have one for the winter and one for the summer. Like, how many houses do you need, right? And the prophet is angry about it. And that anger is being channeled through an angry God. Amos. Woe to those who lie on beds of ivory and lounge on their couches and eat lamb from the flock and calves from the stall, and who sing idle songs to the sound of the harp, and like David improvise on instruments of music, who drink wine from bowls and anoint themselves with the finest oils, but are not grieved over the ruin of Joseph. Therefore, they shall now be the first to go into exile, and the revelry of the loungers shall pass away. Right? So the prophet Amos is calling to bear all of these actions, these decadent actions that the elite are doing, lying on the beds of ivory, eating all of these different things, these giving these really detailed descriptions of very indulgent practices, plush furniture, time for leisure, good food, music, all conspicuous consumption, right? All of this occurred because of the toil and labor of the peasantry. And it's an inverse proportion. So the quality and lifestyle of the peasantry goes down and the upper class goes up. So they're inverse related. More desperate the life of the peasantry becomes, the better the life of the elite becomes. So, and the prophets are angry about it, and they are drawing attention to it because nobody is speaking on their behalf. And the judgment is a complete and utter reversal. So the ruling class are going to be the first that are going to taste the hardships of exile. And they're going to really take them to task. Hear this word, you cows of Bashan, who are on Mount Samaria, who oppress the poor, who crush the needy, who say to their husbands, bring something to drink. The Lord God has sworn by his holiness, the time is surely coming upon you when they shall take you away with hooks even the last of you with foot hooks. Through breaches in the wall you shall lead, each one straight ahead, and you shall be flung out into Harmon, says the Lord. Right? This is an angry prophet, and they're angry on behalf of the peasantry. And in this one, they're particularly angry at the women whose actions are oppressing the poor. And remember, Samaria is the capital of Israel. So they're talking about, the prophet Amos is talking about the women of Samaria's elite. So wives of the elite, wives of the merchants, wives of the court officials, wives of the big landowners. And it's condemning all the things that they did, drinking, their affluent lifestyle, and all of that at the expense of the peasantry. And the judgment is pretty graphic about what's going to happen. Like this giant hook is going to grab them and take them away. Again, this is an angry God. This is an angry God. This is the angry God of the Old Testament that you hear everybody talk about. And there's a real reason that this is an angry God, because nobody is angry on behalf of these peasants who have lost everything. Okay, Isaiah. Woe to those who rise early in the morning in pursuit of strong drink, who linger in the evening to be inflamed by wine, whose feasts consist of lyre and hype, who tambourine and flute and wine, but who do not regard the deeds of the Lord or see the work of his hands. Therefore, my people go into exile for lack of knowledge. Their nobles are dying of hunger, and their multitude is parched with thirst. Okay. Again, Isaiah is talking about the elite, the wealthy, the landowners, and anger about their lifestyle, wine, good music, all of these indulgent practices that are possible because the money is being pulled out of the peasantry and funds their conspicuous consumption. And that's what differentiates the elite. Okay. And the judgment is it's all going to pass away. Everything's going to end. And the people who are hungry will be fed. The people who have everything are going to lose everything. The complete reversal. Pretty standard with the prophets. Okay. Okay, Isaiah. Woe to those who are heroes in drinking wine and valiant at mixing drink, who acquit the guilty for a bribe and deprive the innocents of their rights. Okay, in this one, Isaiah is very mad at a very, very specific group, drunk judges, right? So that's who Isaiah's taken on here. And what Isaiah's angry about is the fact that the judges are able to have this conspicuous consumption because they get extra income from bribes, right? So they are in the pocket of the ruling elite, and they are able to have this lifestyle just like the ruling elite because they are being bribed, and which means they're obligated to the ruling elite. And the ruling elite then can manipulate the legal system. So what it means is that the innocent, usually the poor and the marginalized, have no due process, have no way to have their claims heard in a just manner because you've got these drunk judges who are a part of this corrupt system. And that's who's Isaiah's taken on here. Woe to the proud garland of the drunkards of Ephraim and the fading flower of its glorious beauty at the head of the fertile valley, those overcome with wine. I want to go to the end then. The priest and the prophet reel with strong drink. They are confused with wine. They stagger with drink. They err in vision. They stumble in giving judgment. All tables are covered with filthy vomit. No place is clean. Okay, so What's Isaiah upset about in this one? Um, what Isaiah is basically saying in this one is part of the ruling elite are priests and prophets. Um, and that there are some who have basically bought into this. And that the top officials in Jerusalem and probably Samaria did include these priestly circles. And this is an incredible affront, right? The people who should be speaking on behalf of the marginalized are fully corrupted and engaged in these cycles of oppression. Okay, what's going to happen? What do they believe the prophets are going to happen as a result of this? All of this conspicuous consumption, all of this taking advantage of the peasantry. The wine dries up, the vine languishes, all the merry-hearted sigh. The mirth of the timbrels is stilled, the noise of the jubilance has ceased, the mirth of the lyre is stilled. No longer do they drink wine with singing, strong drink is bitter to those who drink it. The city of chaos is broken down, every house is shut up so that no one can enter. There is an outcry in the streets for lack of wine, all joy has reached its eventide. The gladness of the earth is banished. Desolation is left in the city. The gates are battered into ruins. For thus it shall be on the earth and among the nations, as when an olive tree is beaten, as at the gleaning when the grape harvest is ended. So all of those activities that the prophets had been talking about that describe this consumption, conspicuous consumption, drinking and dancing, all the things that the peasantry did not have the luxury of doing, all of those things end in the judgment. All of the things end. This is what's known as the apocalypse of Isaiah. And it's this vision of the impending catastrophe and what happens. Music ends, wine dries up, the city is destroyed, basically. And the judgment again is the complete reversal of what happened. So, okay, and then again on Isaiah, just at the end there. And this is against the women, again, that they talk about. At the beginning, they're talking about what they're wearing, tinkling of their feet, what they're wearing on their feet. And at the end, instead of perfume, there will be a stench. Instead of a sash, a robe. Instead of well-styled hair, baldness. Instead of a rich robe, a binding of sackcloth. Instead of beauty, shame. That will be what happens. Okay. So again, going up against the women here and saying all of these personal adornments, which are a way of exhibiting all of your socioeconomic wealth and position, these are all going to be, they're all going to be disappeared, and you are going to be deprived of them. And instead, you're going to experience shame. For those of you Game of Thrones fans, I always think of the shame, shame, shame scene in Game of Thrones for this one. Okay, so that is how 8th century prophets felt about conspicuous consumption. They clearly felt that the ruling elite were taking advantage of the peasantry and no one was speaking on their behalf. And that was their job, to lift up the marginalized and to call out this atrocious behavior that was being funded on the backs of the poor. So let's talk about the 1% in our time, okay? So 1% in our country. So the top 1% in the US right now, it controls about 30% of total household worth. That is about $50 trillion. So that's more than the entire middle class. The top 1% controls more than the entire middle class. And that 1% wealth has grown substantially, and that's primarily driven by stock market gains, and we're going to talk about that a little later. And the top 0.1%, those that make more than $46 million that have that, their wealth has almost doubled since the pandemic. The 1%'s net worth has reached a record 52 trillion in mid-2025. Okay, so in our country, to reach the top 1%, a household generally needs an annual income of greater than 700,000, but this varies by state. And the top 10% of Americans in our country, so the top 10% of Americans hold more than double the wealth of the bottom 90%. So you can kind of look at the kind of discrepancy of that one. Top 10% hold more than double the wealth of the bottom 90%. If you look at it globally, the top 1% own more than 95% of the rest of the 95% of the world's population. And this has grown exponentially since 2020. So to join this group, and this is when you look at it globally, you only need a net worth of over $1 million. So if you have a net worth of over $1 million, all of your assets combined, you are a part of the 1% globally. Though this varies by country, it's a little less in India, more in Monaco. Right now, about 37% of the 1% globally live in the US. So if you look at kind of the wealth distribution globally, half of the global population has a net worth less than $3,000 US dollars. Half. Okay, impacts of the 1%. So here's what happens. So having the 1% drives the demand for luxury goods, high-end housing, education, exclusive service. The wealthiest 1% are responsible for twice as many carbon emissions as the poorest 50% of humanity. Twice as many carbon emissions. And that comes through luxury travel, large estates, high-intensity lifestyles. High-income earners drive up prices for essential goods like housings and education, making them unaffordable often. Concentrated economic power often translates into concentrated political power. So that 1% often can fund lobbyists, political campaigns that influence laws in their favor. For example, tax loopholes, deregulation, and we have seen a lot of this in the last 12 months. And then while it seems counterintuitive, extreme wealth inequity can actually slow down the economy because, and this is, in, I guess, violation of trickle-down economics, they've proven this to be not correct. Wealthy individuals tend to save or invest their money in existing assets like real estate or stocks. Lower and middle income people tend to spend the dollars that they have. So when the money gets stuck at the top, there's less money circulating. So it leads to this kind of stagnation in the economy. Okay, this was a really interesting study that a couple of researchers done that studied societies with higher inequality. That means a large gap between the 1% and the rest. And they found that those societies performed worse in almost every social metric. So the larger the gap between the 1% and the rest, higher crime, higher homicide rates, lower life expectancy, higher rates of infant mortality, lower levels of social trust, increased levels of anxiety and status competition. That's a great study. Okay, impacts of the 1%. income equity does threaten democracy. It does create this unequal political influence. So you've got wealthy individuals and corporations. They gain a disproportionate power through this campaign funding. We have basically a deregulated campaign finance now. So it skews policy to benefit the 1%. So you've got a further widening of the gap. Your disenfranchised folks, your vulnerable, marginalized folks, basically are disengaging from the system because they can't impact it. You see that not only with the vulnerable, the marginalized, but you see that with the young folks as well. And then income equality really distorts this kind of democratic thinking, the ideal of one person, one vote, because the 1% don't really have one person, one vote. They really have one person, many votes. So it creates this cycle of really further inequality and democratic decay. Okay, so here's the question then. 8th century prophets really were famous for arguing that God did not like thoughts and prayers, action, going to church if it wasn't accompanied by justice, right? It had to have actions behind it. So the question is, does our society use thoughts and prayers or charitable giving as a substitute for changing the systems that cause inequity? And so that's the question I'm going to send you out with. Hold on, I'm going to stop the show. But before we get in, any questions on any of the stuff that I did for you?
But all about today. Everything that you talked about just applies to what's happening right now.
Yeah, it does.
What happened to Bernie? To Paul.
I got him. Move to. I just have to make sure I've got everyone divided up, Chris. Okay, so again, I'm going to say the question again. Do we use thoughts and prayers and charitable giving as a substitute for changing the systems that cause inequity? Everybody good on the question?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to send you out for about 7 minutes, okay?
Mhm.
I'll see you back in just a bit. Okay, what'd you figure out?
Oh, we solved it all, Marcy.
Did you? Thoughts and prayers are okay?
That's about all they are is okay.
They don't solve the problem.
Yeah,
They just make people feel better. But that's not a bad thing.
yeah, that's true. Anything else?
Well, I like what Bernie's comment, just, like on political advertising and stuff. If we just took that money that goes into political advertising, we could solve most of the homeless problems in the United States,
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
then
it's
the
just-
1% wouldn't get the people they want elected. So, maybe.
Yeah.
I guess it's just that it's a lot better use of the money than, and like we were talking about having these elaborate fundraisers to put for people to bring money and for a good cause.
Mhm.
You just ask people to write another check and save on all the fundraising expenses.
Well,
Yeah.
you look at what Christy Nome did.
Yeah, that came up.
What was it, 190 million or 290 that she spent for her to look good riding a horse in front of
Yeah.
it's how do you stop that?
Yeah.
That's
And that
I
came,
don't know.
That came out of Homeland Security funds? Is that what?
Yeah.
Good. And I think, as you see, one of the arguments is government shouldn't be funding a social network, that should be done by the churches and by private donations, right? So that the safety net the government should be out of the work of a safety net.
Oh,
That is the rationale why, you see a lot of the cuts that are happening, and that the churches need to step up and they need to be doing that work. If that work's going to be done, then it should be done by the churches. So that it comes down to the question of, does church have a role in providing the safety net for the marginalized?
I think they do. They
Well,
do
of course,
doing
yeah.
that constantly, but
Yeah.
Not
the
you have-
government shouldn't need so much money then, should they? Other than they spend all their money on buying more missiles.
Yeah. Oh. Diane, you were going to say something?
Well, it's just, yes, the churches have a role, but this separation we have of the middle class getting less and less and less. Those are the people going to church. So there you go.
It is true. It is true.
They're paying rent, they're paying for food for their children.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite quotes about it. When I feed the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why the poor have no food, they call me a communist. This is a quote often attributed to Oscar Romero, but
Oh my gosh.
by a Brazilian archbishop. A lot of wisdom in that one about asking why people are poor. Okay, we're going to talk about market conditions and just do a little bit, and then we're going to talk about market conditions in our country. So again, what happens is the elite pulled the agricultural surplus out of the rural areas, and then that supported their lifestyle. And it was in an abusive, corrupt system, and it sucked this economic advantage out because they took advantage of the land grab, basically. As a result of it, the staples for the peasants were in short supply. They couldn't feed their families. They had to go buy the food they needed to feed their families. And then once they were there, they were taken advantage of again, because in the markets, they were disadvantaged because there were deceitful people in the markets who would sell them using weighted measures. So they got screwed multiple times, and the prophets are going to come to their aid on this. So Amos, hear this, you who trample on the needy and bring to ruin the poor of the land. And then they go on to talk about what actually is making them mad: practicing deceit with false balances, buying the poor for silver. So what Amos is mad here again is these market conditions and their impact on the peasants. They're being evicted from their land, forced to sell their land. They're in this kind of cycle of debt slavery. And the merchants are taking advantage of them. So first of all, they're selling their grain at higher prices. So they're stockpiling it. They're creating artificial scarcity. So prices are going up even more. And then they've got these rigged scales. So they've got false measures, and they're cheating the peasants in their sales. And they're using one set of weights to purchase and then one set to sell them. So the peasants are constantly getting screwed. So that's what Amos is angry about here. A trader in whose hands are false balances, he loves to oppress. Hosea is angry about this as well. They're talking about the market conditions. Again, fraudulent practices where merchants are even boasting about the fact that they are doing this, that they have these ill-gotten gains at the expense of the peasantry. And again, what are the prophets going to call for is a complete reversal. In this case, a complete economic reversal. So the prophets are going to call for the big undoing. So that was the market conditions of the 8th century. So I want to talk a little bit about our market conditions. And this goes back to kind of still the 1%. So I want to talk about who benefits from our markets, in particular our stock market. So here's some stuff on our stock market. So the top 10% of households own about the 87 and 93% of all US stocks. So the top 1% hold roughly 50% of the entire market value. So the stock market is owned by half of it is owned, over half by the top 1%. Baby boomers control about 53% of the stock market. Baby boomers control about $30 trillion as of late 2025. The stock market is predominantly controlled by white individuals, 88%. Average 568,000, much lower. Hispanic families, 97,000, Black families, 80,000. Huge discrepancy based on race and participation in the stock market. The bottom 50% of households in our country only own about 1% of the total wealth of the stock market. So they may have some exposure through retirement accounts, but the bottom 50%, so the bottom 50% of our country, roughly their retirements are around $3,800 per person. And they are disproportionately impacted harder when the market crashes because they do not have any type of cushion to wait out a downturn. Black Americans represent almost 14% of the population, but they own only 0.7% of all stocks. Okay, so how does our market adversely impact poor people? So when the stock markets decline or when companies feel pressure to meet these quarterly earnings, they often respond by cutting costs, and that disproportionately impacts low-income workers. And they often don't have the assets or the reserves to fall back on. Some companies will choose to maintain paying a high dividend to satisfy investors, even while laying off thousands of workers. And many companies have been in the news recently, tech companies in particular, for paying out high dividends while also shaving off thousands and thousands of workers. And large stock market falls historically coincide with economic contractions. So spikes in unemployment, they really do hit the low-skilled workers the hardest. They usually have zero saving buffers, and they struggle to survive these periods without work. So. Okay, so I'm going to ask you one more question in your groups. If a society's stock market is in great shape, but its most vulnerable people are struggling to feed their family, does the society possess true wealth? If a society's stock market is in great shape, great Dow Jones average, but it's vulnerable or struggling to feed their family, does that society possess true wealth? Okay. That's the question I'm going to send you back for. Same breakout rooms. I'm going to give you about 6 minutes at the most, and I'm going to pull you back, okay? And I'll put it in chat. I'll see you in a bit. Sorry, I didn't give you much time on that one. So
Again, we solved it, Marcy.
you solved it. That's so good. Okay, what's the answer? If we have poor people, do we have true wealth?
No.
If we have a good Dow Jones?
No.
No?
I think that
Our group
that's
said
exactly
that
the problem right now. Trump keeps saying, yeah, the economy's good, and everybody else says, no.
Not
Well, we
hard.
can't
that
believe
the
anything he says, so forget
No,
that.
but I mean, from his standpoint, it is all doing great because his stock's doing good.
Mm-hmm,
we
mm-hmm.
we said that the people having so much money in the stocks uh, makes it harder for the next generation, for the younger people to get started. And so in that way, the society is not healthy.
Mm-mm.
Mm.
And they can't get into a house which can produce wealth. And so they're relying on their salary. And we know a lot of the entry-level jobs have been taken away from tech and all over. So it's tough on that. It's tough on them. They're just surviving,
Yeah.
paying what they have to pay, putting a roof over their head.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really surprised at the distribution of the stock market that was owned by generations. I was really surprised at that one. I didn't expect that one.
Well, I think the baby boomers did have a good deal,
Yeah.
That's why they're called boomers, that things boomed.
Well, we had, after World War II, the booming of the economy, right?
Yeah.
And then we had the tech influence, which was also, I worked for a company that gave me stock, right? That kind of thing. And so that's why that generation will be able to pass it down, but it will stop eventually because, well, we've talked about this,
Well, and like 401ks, those didn't exist before, and
Mhm.
boomers got to take advantage of that. I mean, I used to work for a company that matched dollar for dollar everything I put
Right.
in 401k. Now I don't know of any companies that do that now, but
Mhm.
and there were people in the company that didn't take advantage of that. The younger people than me didn't save money. I put every dollar I could afford into that. That's the only reason I have a 401k.
Okay, any other final thoughts on the relationships between the stock market and poor people and true wealth in a society? Y'all good?
Yeah. Well, we're not all good with that, but
No, good with it, but so many parallels, so many
Exactly.
right between entry profits and what they were angry about and what's going on today in our country.
Which is really sad, isn't it? We haven't solved anything.
Yeah. Okay, so next week we're going to do one more 8th century prophets, and we're going to talk about debt slavery and the court system, and we're going to look at, is the court system fair in our country? And we're going to look at predatory lending practices in our country. So we'll do that next week, and then we'll move on from our beloved 8th century prophets. We'll say goodbye to Amos and Hosea and First Isaiah and Micah. I feel like we've sucked them dry after next week. So okay, one more week of them, and then we'll move on from them. Okay. Okay, so I'll see you
Thank
back.
you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Marcy.
Take care, everybody.
bye.